What if the thing ruining your life isn't loud? What if it doesn't scream, doesn't crash through your plans, doesn't break things in front of you? What if the real damage comes silently? Not from what you fear, but from what you've learned to ignore. There's a fear inside you that you've grown so used to. It doesn't feel like fear anymore. It feels like hesitation, like second guessing, like maybe not now. It shows up every time you get close to something real, a risk, a dream, a decision that could change everything. But then something pulls you back, a voice, a weight, a story you've told yourself 1,000 times. And just like that, you retreat. You call it timing, logic, maturity. But deep down, it's fear, quiet, polished, familiar. And that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. Because you don't fight it. You justify it. You build your life around it. And slowly, almost beautifully, it kills everything it touches. Your drive, your joy, your potential. And you never even notice, because it doesn't look like fear. It looks like being careful. Because fear doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it whispers in a voice that sounds like your own. It says, be realistic. It says, maybe later. It says, you're not ready yet. And you believe it, not because it's true, but because it's comfortable. Because believing it means you don't have to move, don't have to risk, don't have to fail. But here's the truth you've been avoiding. Fear doesn't stop you from dying. It stops you from living. It convinces you to build a life that looks safe on the outside, but is slowly decaying from the inside. You make decisions based on absence of danger, of rejection, of judgment, instead of presence of purpose, presence of fire, presence of self. And over time, you become a version of yourself that's very good at surviving, but not at being alive. You're composed, controlled, stable, but numb, disconnected. You've learned how to avoid chaos, but you've forgotten how to chase meaning. Because fear doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes it looks like perfection. Perfection is fear in disguise. It tells you to wait until you're ready, but never lets you feel ready enough. It keeps you polishing things that should have been lived. You rewrite the same plan, the same goal, the same version of your life, over and over, without ever stepping into it. You convince yourself that you're being wise. But wisdom without action is just fear wearing a wise face. And fear loves to dress up. It pretends to be humility when it's really shame. It pretends to be logic when it's really doubt. It pretends to be patience when it's really paralysis. And you follow it because it feels safer than trying. Because trying might lead to failure, to rejection, to pain. But here's the cost no one talks about. Fear may protect you from pain, but it also blocks you from power, from purpose, from becoming. And somewhere deep inside, you feel it. That quiet ache, that silent scream that says, this isn't it, this isn't who I am. But instead of listening, you get busy. You fill your time, your feed, your mind. You call it productivity, growth, discipline. But deep down, you know what it really is, distraction. Because if you slowed down, even for a moment, the voice would get louder, and you're not sure you're ready to hear it, because that voice doesn't flatter you. It doesn't praise you for surviving. It doesn't applaud you for being safe. It asks harder questions, like, what are you pretending not to want? What dreams did you abandon before you ever gave them a chance? What would your life look like if fear wasn't making the decisions? These questions don't come with easy answers, but they come with power, because the moment you stop running, the moment you stop performing, you start to remember, not who the world wanted you to be, but who you were before fear taught you to hide. And that is the beginning of freedom. But freedom is never comfortable. It doesn't come wrapped in certainty. It comes wrapped in risk, in unlearning, in unbecoming, in standing alone in a life that no longer fits. When you stop letting fear decide, the world stops recognizing you. People start pulling away. Some say you've changed. Some try to pull you back. Some look at you like a stranger. And in many ways, you are. Because for the first time, you're not living for their expectations. You're not waiting for permission. You're not shrinking to stay liked. You're choosing what's real over what's familiar. And that choice costs you everything that was built on the lie. But what it gives you in return is something most people never taste. Silence. Not the empty kind, but the kind that speaks. Space. Not the kind that isolates, but the kind that reveals. Power. Not the kind that controls others, but the kind that reconnects you to yourself. Fear won't disappear, but it will lose control. Because once you stop obeying it, it starts to shrink. Not overnight, but slowly. With every choice that says, I hear you, but I'm doing it anyway. Not the mask, not the performance, but the self that was buried beneath all the noise. You don't need to be fearless to live fully. You just need to stop giving fear the final vote. Because the life you want, the one that fits, won't wait for you to feel ready. It begins the moment you start walking toward it, shaking, unsure, but awake. And that's the moment most people miss, not because they're weak, but because they never stop long enough to see what fear has taken from them. So the question now isn't, what are you afraid of? It's, what has fear already stolen? And are you willing to take it back? What would your life look like today if fear never made a single decision for you?